So let's actually start off with a question. Does every inch count? Now this is the very first time I have tried an 18-inch display, and I didn't think 2 inches would matter much transitioning from my Alienware X16 to this. But oh yeah, this is nice. It makes an impression. And it's not just the bigger screen where you would benefit. You also get the bigger chassis, which means there's more room for cooling and more room for the manufacturer to potentially shove in extra features. Unfortunately, ROG may have left a few opportunities untapped. So let's talk about it. There are 24 cores in here with that i9-3980HX, dealing frequencies of up to 5.6 GHz, at least for the P cores, which are 8, and then 16 E cores, covering 32 threads. How do we jump from 8 straightforward cores from 2-3 years ago to 24 cores now? It's all a bit much. We also get 32 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM that is running at 4800 mega transfers per second. I've usually seen like 5400 or 5600 mega transfer per second RAM in like 2023 models. But also interestingly, the website mentions that 32 gigabytes is the max RAM capacity in this, which is a big bummer for me. We also get a single terabyte of NVMe Gen 4 storage. It's a Micron 2400 SSD, and that also could have been faster. We also get one empty PCIe slot for that second drive. But you know what? In a device this big, they could have even given us another extra PCIe slot for a third drive, just to sweeten the deal. Anyway, and we have that NVIDIA RTX 4070 in here with 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM with an interface of 128 bits. That's like the same as the 4060, but anyway, that's a different debate. All of this costed me around 3,000 Canadian dollars, which includes taxes. And I think that's probably one of the more affordable options in this desktop replacement 18-inch category. But still, is it all worth it? But before I get into all of that, I have to ask, guys, if you find my content to be useful, please do consider subscribing to my channel. My reviews tend to focus more on the user experience perspective of utilizing such tech, and with your support, I can continue to bring out new content. Originally, I thought I would actually be using the G18 as an exercise weight, but surprisingly, it doesn't feel that heavy. Granted, there's a lot of plastic used in the build all around, underneath, and one would be quick to conclude that Asus has been cutting corners and cheapening up their offering. But using plastic can also result in weight savings. And this behemoth at 3 kilograms is about 400 grams heavier than my Alienware X16, and in my backpack though, or even when I'm lifting it up, it doesn't feel heavier. I use the Legion 17 backpack in which I was able to shove this in. I do think that it feels premium to the touch where it matters. The keyboard deck itself, which feels like it has metallic qualities, and the outer lid. Screen hinge feels pretty solid. Very little wobble, but having these two arms leap out of the device means that there are these two holes just sort of left out here in which some debris can crawl their way in. So make sure that you have a clean backpack before throwing this in. But the internal surface in here is absolutely silk, abnormally smooth. Oh yeah, this is good. But we should move on to the ports, which I am unhappy about. With the entire rear of this device covered in exhaust vents and heat sinks, the ports have to be then on either side. There are two Type A 3.2 Gen 2 ports on the right, and that's it. And you also get two Type C ports on the left, same version except the one which is Thunderbolt 4, big whoop. You also find an Ethernet jack on the left, which is 2.5 gigabit. You get an HDMI 2.1 port, a headphone jack, a power jack, and that's about it. There is no SD card slot, not even a micro SD card slot. Even the G14 has a micro SD slot. It's just frustrating, all of this real estate, and that's it? They could have at least given us one extra port. Even the Legion Slim 7 has 3 Type A ports. Gamers need ports. What, should we keep a USB hub in addition to this lump? Display. It is a QHD plus display, which means 1600p. It has a brightness of between 450 nits and 500 nits, which is pretty good. That is great, but not micro LED great. It supports Dolby Vision, HDR, has a 3 millisecond response time, and supports G-Sync. All of that is really nice and really complements the size of the screen. As for color accuracy, according to the measurements done by Notebook Check, this display manages 100% sRGB, 98% DCI-P3, and 86% Adobe RGB. So it's a screen that is really great for creators and also for viewing your content and media. Now these are just my personal sentiments, but the 2 extra inches did make me feel a little bit more involved in my game. It was a little bit easier for me to spot my enemies from far away in Modern Warfare, though I still died a lot. I'd say generally games felt a little bit more immersive, but even after weeks and weeks of use, going back to my 16-inch Alienware didn't exactly feel all that much different. Keyboard typing was also pretty similar to what I had experienced on the M16, very comfortable to type on, good accuracy. They feel a little bit smushy, but they have 1.9 millimeters of key travel, which can be satisfying. The arrow keys are shoved a little bit into the numpad section for a clean, consistent look. I tend to use the arrow keys in Excel workbooks, and I often found myself a little annoyed reaching out to the other keys. I like that they've got separate volume up and down keys, and I especially like that there is a mic mute toggle switch here, and when you use it, you get a visual indicator of whether the microphone is on or off. It would have been nice if there was like a physical indicator here just to show whether it is on or off, because sometimes during games I lose track. It's what I have on my Alienware X16, so I got used to that, I guess. You can switch between the RGB profile using the Aura key. You also have a separate key to switch between the 3 main performance profiles on this device, and you also get a separate key for going into the ROG Armory Create software, which I will talk about in detail in a little bit. The touchpad here has a nice size to it. It feels as silky smooth as the rest of the deck I had mentioned earlier. The clicks here feel pretty nice, pretty tight. I actually really like this trackpad. It's, I'd say, second or third favorite trackpad after the Razer Blade here. Now what is shocking to me is that there is no biometric login. No fingerprint, no facial login either. This is a 720p webcam. It's not even 1080p, and it makes me look like an oil painting. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a little bit difficult to explain for professional use cases. Got a hard drive indicator right here. A hard drive indicator. We don't use tape drives anymore. Very 1993. This light would have been more useful if it showed me whether my mic was on or off, or this light could have been used to show which performance profile my laptop is in. It's just weird that ROG made the effort to add a tiny OLED screen into their newer Razer Pro controller, but nothing here. Like, there's so much space to experiment with something like that, and it's just a missed opportunity. I've said it before, the ROG Strix styling does not generally agree with me. It feels a bit juvenile, a bit cheesy, too overstyled, too overcooked. It is dripping with ROG signage everywhere. They're probably targeting young gaming enthusiasts. If you are one, good luck convincing your parents to buy this for you for schoolwork. Clearly, it's not shy to express its gaming heritage. It is a little bit muted compared to its predecessors, thankfully. There is even styling underneath the device. Look at this. The bottom emphasizes its intelligence about cooling. And look at all this pattern work here that no one's going to look at. Forgotten why. Maybe you were walking around with its bottom facing outwards. As a conversation starter, someone would have a look at it and ask you, what does this mean 18.15.07? And with a stiff upper lip, you can tell them it is the alphabetical order of ROG. And with their minds blown, girls and boys would come running towards you. No, it's not gonna happen. No. You would have only imaginary friends. Guys, I know, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep bashing the typical Strix styling. They have continued this design language for many years now, and I'm sure there are many out there who actually prefer this. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess. In modern laptops, you would see a lot of ventilation underneath to deal with the excess heat of that extra power. This one, though, has specific cutouts for specific components, for example, over the drive, or the fan vents naturally, or the third fan right here, but not through and through. If I actually read through some of ROG's marketing material, their intent becomes very clear. I'm reading this out verbatim. Even casual passersby will notice that the Strix G18 has more attitude than other gaming machines. Our 360 degrees design philosophy puts subtle but distinctive elements across every part of the machine, giving the chassis more flavor and flair while still being easily identifiable as an ROG machine from across the room. Well, ROG, mission accomplished. There is no way that this laptop would ever get confused with anything else. Well, all of the bashing aside, I do have an inner child, a rather troubled one, and I do really like the startup effects. It's like firing up a spaceship from battle. I like that. I will say though, genuinely, compared to the Alienware M18, and I don't have it on hand, I do prefer the styling of this to that. This one at least has some personality compared to Alienware, very bland lump of backwards design. And it has a pretty awesome command software. The Armory grade software might feel sometimes a bit too imaginative with its futuristic user interface, but it is actually pretty useful. It basically shows you everything you need to know about your device. The CPU, GPU, temperatures and frequencies, the amount of fan RPM, and even the amount of noise the fan is generating. You have performance monitoring and data logging, customizable hotkeys, and I really like that you have an option to turn off that stupid modern standby which has been plaguing my Windows 11 experience. You can also use that software to customize the RGB to your absolute heart's content. It is extremely capable, and there's a nice list of effects to choose from and apply to the per key RGB here, and the 4-zone light bar up front. In addition to stacking up the RGB effects using layers, the software also gives you a timeline. And what that means is I can use that to actually spell out this channel's name. I just use that as an example. I'm not self-obsessed or anything. The software is pretty nice, but the RGB LEDs here could have been a little bit brighter, but they are very color accurate. The whites are truly white. There are only 3 levels of RGB brightness that you control using the function F2, F3 keys. The light bar up front has only 4 customizable zones, so 2 at the front and 1 on each side. The Legion 7 by comparison, the 7th generation, had 10 customizable lighting zones. Also, the Legion's bar was thinner and a little bit more discreet. The software provides 3 performance modes: silent, performance, which is the balance mode, and turbo. You can switch between these profiles using the M4 key, and the on-screen display will show you which profile you're in. You also get to set a manual mode in which you can fine-tune the thermal settings. You can set the CPU sustained power and boost power limits, set the GPU thermal limits, and also the fan curve. Just to clarify, these settings are not going to help you squeeze out more power, but to actually do the opposite, to help you control thermals in an environment in which the ambient temperature perhaps is too high. My primary interest was in turbo mode so that I can squeeze out every bit of potential out of this, the results of which I will speak more about towards the tail end of this video. There are also several other controls within the Armory grade software you can use to moderate the battery life on this. The most important option is that of choosing the integrated graphics or the dedicated GPU, which is the RTX 4070 here. And you get 4 options. You can select with the standard mode, which is basically hybrid. It will switch between your integrated graphics and your dedicated graphics based on the application that is running. However, both of them get power. Ultimate mode will switch off integrated graphics completely so that the RTX 4070 gets the most amount of power, so that the RTX 4070 can actually perform to its full potential in here. Eco mode does the absolute opposite. The RTX 4070 is turned off completely and everything is done through the integrated graphics, and that's what we'd be interested in for you to get like the best amount of battery life. Lastly, optimize mode, which is very useful, is when you plug the device in, the laptop will only use the RTX 4070, and when you unplug it, it will only use integrated graphics. You can also set up this device to drop refresh rate down to 60 Hz when you unplug it. You can also manually switch off cores within the CPU, like the individual P cores and E cores. So in order for me to maximize the battery life out of this, I dropped the number of P cores to 4, which is the bare minimum, and also dropped the E cores to absolute 0, so it became like a basic quad core CPU. And then I switched over to silent mode, which will limit the fan speed and then will also limit CPU frequency. I dropped the screen brightness down to 250-200 nits, volume down to 40% or so, RGB brightness set to its lowest setting, and then I started my standard YouTube test, which is streaming a blend of 720p and 1080p content with a few Chrome tabs open on the side and a few documents open on the side as well. And in that scenario, I achieved a battery life of 2 hours and 45 minutes from the 90 watt-hour battery in here. Considering the substantial real estate, I could have managed a 99 watt-hour one here. Even with a large screen, I was expecting more out of this, so I decided to do another battery drain test in which I increased the E cores from 0 to 4 so that the CPU workloads can be split into more efficient cores. And then I also decreased the frequency of the sensor logs being produced from half a second to a minute. This was there to reduce the load on the CPU. And with that configuration, I was able to increase the battery life by about 20 to 25 minutes. So I got about 3 hours and 8 minutes. And you can also see in the graph up on screen that the CPU utilization also went lower. As a comparison, I remember that with the Asus M16, I got close to about 4 hours. The device does charge up rather quickly though. I was able to charge this up from 0 to 50% in about 30 minutes. We get a 280 watt charging brick with this, which is roughly the same size as my 330 watt charging brick that I got with my Alienware X16. The charging wire is actually kind of short. There's a chance that the adapter might be hanging on the side helplessly, or you may have to accommodate the charging brick itself to be placed right on the desk itself. Things become a little trickier if, for example, your power outlet is towards your right because the power plug is on the left side. The sound in here is actually not bad at all. The website claims a 5.1.2 configuration. The 0.2 denotes Atmos, though I'm struggling to see any vents that are on top. Overall, it does create a bit of a spatial environment, and I think it provides a very balanced representation of sound, so I wish it could have been louder. You can definitely feel being shot at during the game of Modern Warfare 2. You get the Dolby Atmos software to tweak the equalizer to your liking. Yes, the sound could have been louder, but this is definitely one of the better systems that I've heard on a gaming laptop, maybe coming second or third to the Alienware X16. Now, talking about thermals, to you as the end user should feel absolutely fantastic. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, a bigger body means more room for the temperature to be regulated. We've got two main fans, and then there is a one chassis fan in the middle to help overall dissipate heat from the system. As a result, the keyboard deck right here, especially the wrist areas, they genuinely remain cool. They're not even warm. Even after hours and hours of gaming, even the parts around the keyboard, up, top, down, below. I played Starfield on this for 5 hours straight, and it felt like I was just browsing the internet. But when I took the headphones out, I could clearly hear the sound of the fan. In silent mode, the fans can completely turn off if not under significant load. And even when they turn on, they're not very loud. They're rather discreet. I conducted a 20-minute stress test using the 3D Mark Time Spice software, and you'll see the results up on screen. CPU temperatures using the enhanced mode were averaging only 73 degrees, and that's pretty good. And GPU temperatures were averaging 64 degrees. The power being fed to the GPU averaged 101 watts, so that's overall not bad. Now, this is a test in which the CPU would not come under a lot of load. That is where I want to bring up the test results from a Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer game. And you'll see the CPU temperatures by two methods, DTS and enhanced, would actually average 75 degrees Celsius and 84 degrees Celsius. I also understand that of all the instances logged, 12% of those suffered from thermal throttling. In terms of performance, I think this is the best I've seen the 4070 perform across the other devices I've seen, albeit by a very small margin. So the 4070 has an artificial power limit of around 100 watts, although ROG advertises that this can go up to 140 watt, and this includes a 25 watt dynamic boost. You see here up on screen, using the logs from a Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer game, the GPU was actually averaging around 80 watts, and that is a noticeable difference from the 3D Mark Time Spy test. And that is because it's a game in which the CPU will play an important role and cannot spare any additional power to the GPU, so that dynamic boost is not very helpful in this scenario. And this is what the real world would look like. You can average around 80 watts. 100 watts is going to be difficult to achieve. 140 watts, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So talking about the 3D Mark Time Spy test, I got a score of 12,751, and that is slightly more than the score I got on the Asus M16, which was 12,489. So roughly this is in line with also the results I got on the Legion 7i, the 2023 Gen 8. You should also be able to see like the average frame rates I got in different games using their built-in benchmarks. You should also be seeing a comparison to the results I got in the Asus M16. For reference, that device had a 3900H instead of the 980HX here, and had also the 4070. Overall, I think you should be able to really enjoy AAA titles on this with their high settings at UHD plus resolution. You should know that for all of the tests that I did run, I did not use any DLSS or any other upsampling technique, and I also did not use ray tracing just to keep things a little bit straightforward. For ray tracing performance and other unique NVIDIA features, I do want to specifically talk about Cyberpunk 2077. I was getting an average of 52 frames a second with the ultra ultra preset, and that did not include any ray tracing or whatever. But then we've got the ray tracing overdrive feature, in which I was averaging around 26 frames a second. Then I turned on frame generation and I kept path tracing on. With DLSS, I was able to achieve 38 frames a second. Even in Far Cry 6, without ray tracing, I was getting an average of 85 frames a second, and with ray tracing, I was getting an average of 73 frames a second. Similarly, in Guardians of the Galaxy, I was getting 107 frames a second without ray tracing and 77 frames a second with ray tracing. Since Starfield is the most recent game I tested here, I do want to deep dive into that a bit. I started off with the Ultra preset, which still keeps the render resolution at around 70 and 80% and not even the full 100%. On paper, that sounded like a relatively light setting, but Starfield has turned out to be quite a beast of a game, at least for right now. Maybe there's optimization down the line. But I was getting an average of 30 to 35 frames a second in the actual gameplay, and the frame rate in the Ultra preset could actually even drop to 2022 in certain scenes, and that was annoying. I had to turn the settings down by one level to just high. Then the average frame rates were around 40-45, and they would dip down to say 30 frames a second in intense scenes, and that was much better and perfectly fine for me. There was also something a little bit strange happening, where the frame rates would just plummet to like 10-15 frames a second and just stick there for no apparent reason. Usually when I switch between the menus and then get back into the game, and then I have to do the same thing again, and this frame rate would continue back up again. And I don't know if this is an ROG thing or a 4070 thing. I don't know what it is, but it really did dull down the experience of the game, and I haven't had that experience in my X16s. And I also must admit that on a larger screen, if the render resolution goes below native, like below QHD, it's easier to spot the pixelation up on screen. Just saying, if you want to truly appreciate the beauty of Starfield in a portable laptop format, you may have to stick to an RTX 4080 or higher. So let's conclude. As an 18-inch device, I really do like the ROG G18. Thermals in here are amazing, and the performance isn't bad. Display is decent, and it's also, like I said, probably the cheaper option that you can get for an 18-inch device. But who is this device really for? It's got the RGB and the styling to excite the 10-year-old. Yet the display has decent color accuracy, which can attract creators. But there is no SD card slot, and it's got limited ports, and it's got a rubbish webcam for creative meetings. And for people like me who basically want everything in a laptop, on top of the already ignored features, not having any biometric login abilities is truly unacceptable. It's not a gaming lunatic enough for younger audiences or serious enough for creative professional types. There's also not anything fresh going on here that can really excite the 10-year-old within me, apart from that startup animation. If thermals are a big deal for you, and you're probably using your device in un-air-conditioned environments with higher ambient temperatures, then the bigger size could actually be a plus point for you, and the screen is just a bonus. However, on the contrary, I would personally just stick to a 16-inch device and save the money and get an external display. Besides, with the recent influx of portable gaming like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, upcoming Legion Go, perhaps size really doesn't matter as much as I had thought. Thank you all very much for your time to watch this review all the way through. If you found my content to be useful, please do consider subscribing to my channel. I am looking forward to also putting a review for the Legion 9i soon, and I'm very excited about that. So we'll see you next time.